There are moments in history that define a leader, not in speeches, not in policies, but in rare, unscripted interactions. This moment with Donald Trump and a disabled child will change the way you see him forever. There he was, standing before thousands, delivering another powerful speech. Cameras flashed, cheers erupted. But in the middle of it all, something happened, something no one expected. A child, a small, fragile figure in the crowd. And in a split second, Trump's attention shifted. What followed next left everyone speechless. What he did wasn't scripted. It wasn't rehearsed. And yet, it may be one of the most unforgettable moments of his public life. And what happened after that? Well, you might never look at him the same way again. Stay till the end, because this story is about to take a turn you won't believe. It was a high-profile event, one of many in Donald Trump's packed schedule. The venue buzzed with energy, supporters cheering, cameras rolling, reporters scribbling down every word. The atmosphere was electric, filled with anticipation. But no one knew that this night would be remembered for something entirely different. Trump was in his element, delivering one of his signature speeches, bold, confident, commanding. He spoke about policies, the future, the strength of America. The crowd responded with roaring applause. It was politics as usual, until it wasn't. In the midst of the sea of faces, there was one that stood out, not because of a loud voice or a waving sign, but because of something far more profound. A child, seated in a wheelchair, watching with wide, hopeful eyes. They weren't there for the spectacle. They weren't there for the politics. They were there for something deeper, perhaps a moment of recognition, perhaps just a glance. But what they got was something far greater. And then, the moment happened. Trump's gaze flickered, then locked onto the child. A split second of recognition. And in that instant, everything changed. The applause faded for a moment as Trump's eyes lingered on the child. It wasn't just a passing glance. There was something about them that caught his attention. Without hesitation, he took a step forward, then another. The security detail tense, unsure of what was happening, but he kept moving. The child, a young boy no older than 10, sat in his wheelchair, hands folded in his lap. His small frame seemed even smaller under the bright lights of the stage. He wasn't waving, wasn't calling out, just sitting there, watching. Trump stopped just a few feet away. The crowd grew quieter, sensing something unusual. For a moment, it was just the two of them in a silent exchange. Then, Trump did something no one expected. He bent down, lowering himself to the child's level, meeting him eye to eye. A hushed murmur rippled through the audience. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters leaned forward. This wasn't planned. This wasn't politics. This was something different. The boy's lips parted slightly, as if searching for words. Trump, usually a man of bold statements and sharp rhetoric, simply waited. He gave the child a moment, a space to speak. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, the boy finally said something. Words so simple, yet so powerful, that they changed the entire mood of the room. Whatever was said in that moment, whatever passed between them, it was enough to make even the loudest critics pause. And what Trump did next, that's what truly left everyone stunned. Trump leaned in slightly, his expression shifting. No longer the commanding presence behind a podium, but something softer, more human. The boy looked up at him, his hands gripping the arms of his wheelchair. Then, in a voice filled with both innocence and quiet strength, he spoke. I just wanted to meet you. The words hung in the air, simple yet profound. The boy's eyes shone with sincerity, his voice barely carrying over the hushed crowd. And in that moment, something in Trump's face changed. The usual sharp confidence was still there. But now, there was something else, something unguarded. For a moment, he didn't say anything. He just nodded, as if understanding something unspoken. Then, slowly, he reached out and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. It wasn't a grand gesture, not a rehearsed act of political showmanship. It was something far rarer, genuine. The audience, which had moments ago been filled with roaring cheers, was now silent, watching intently. Even the press, often quick to analyze every move, seemed caught off guard. This was different. This was real. "What's your name?" Trump finally asked, his voice lower than usual. The boy answered, and for the first time that night, Trump wasn't speaking to a crowd, wasn't addressing a nation. He was speaking to just one person. And that changed everything. Then, the unexpected happened. Trump didn't stand up right away. Instead, he asked another question, and another. A conversation began, one that no one had anticipated. And with each word exchange, the weight of the moment grew heavier. But the real shock came when Trump, known for his fast-paced rallies and sharp political wit, did something no one saw coming. Right there, in front of thousands, he made a promise that would send ripples far beyond that one night. The boy's face lit up as Trump continued speaking to him, not as a politician, not as a public figure, but as a person. The conversation was brief, but the weight of it was undeniable. And then, in a moment that no one expected, Trump turned back toward the crowd, his hand still resting on the boy's shoulder. "You know," he said, his voice carrying across the silent arena. "This young man here is stronger than most people I've ever met." The crowd erupted in applause, but Trump wasn't finished. He glanced down at the boy again, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "What do you dream about?" he asked, his tone softer now. The boy hesitated, then answered, his voice filled with quiet hope. The response seemed to strike something deep within Trump. He nodded, then turned back to the audience. "Kids like him are the future. They face challenges most of us can't even imagine, and yet, look at him. He's here, he's smiling, he's strong." He paused, letting his words settle. "And I'll tell you something, I want to do something for kids like him. Something real." The boy's eyes widened as Trump turned back to him. "I'm going to make sure you, and kids like you, have the support you need." That's a promise. It wasn't a vague political statement. It wasn't scripted. It was direct, personal. The crowd roared in approval. Some cheered, some clapped, and some just watched in awe. Even the harshest critics in the room had to acknowledge what had just happened. This was a side of Trump rarely seen. And in that moment, it wasn't about politics. It was about something much bigger. As Trump straightened up, he gave the boy one last pat on the shoulder. "You're going to do great things, kid. I know it." Then, with a final nod, he turned back to the stage. But the atmosphere had completely shifted. As the night continued, the energy in the room never quite returned to what it was before that moment. The audience, still buzzing from the unexpected encounter, couldn't help but reflect on what had just unfolded. Even after Trump had moved on to other parts of his speech, the moment with the boy lingered in the air, undeniable and unforgettable. Over the next few days, the footage of that interaction went viral. Clips flooded social media, news outlets picked it up, and commentators, who had long seen Trump through a political lens, couldn't help but ask, was this a moment of genuine humanity? Some saw it as a powerful gesture, one that showed a side of the former president rarely seen in the media. Others, of course, questioned the authenticity, suggesting it was a well-timed PR move. But what was undeniable was the emotional weight of that brief interaction. For that brief moment, Trump wasn't a politician. He was a man talking to a child, connecting on a deeply human level. And what about the child? What did this moment mean for him? For the boy, it wasn't just a meeting with a famous person. It was a reminder that, despite all the challenges he faced, someone in the highest position of power was acknowledging his strength. It was a reminder that his dreams mattered, that he wasn't invisible. As for Trump, the moment seemed to redefine him in many ways. People who had seen him as a polarizing figure were suddenly discussing him in a new light. No matter your political views, no one could ignore the undeniable impact of his words that night. It wasn't just a fleeting moment. It became a symbol of what happens when empathy meets leadership. And as for the future, the promise Trump made that night to support children facing similar challenges remained at the forefront. The question lingered, would this be more than just words? Time would tell. But for now, one thing was certain. This was a moment that left a mark. A rare moment in public life when politics took a backseat, and something more important took its place: genuine human connection.